So when talk about natural selection, always remember is the environment is the one that play the important role. It's not the human going to choose who can survive, who cannot survive. It's as if that is a God that determine which variations can survive better, which cannot. Okay, so very important, natural selections actually always act on variation. Now, very, very important because the next subtopics or next two subtopics, we're going to look at some effect where we are unselectively, we kill, for example, poaching, hunting, okay, or earthquake, natural disaster, we kill, okay. But I know that those natural disaster, they don't act on a particular variation. They kill unselectively. So that one is not the natural selection. It's a different form that change the allele frequency. Okay, so that one we're going to learn it later. But when talk about natural selection, it must act on a particular variation. They have choose a particular variation to favor or have a selective advantage. And other ones will have the selective disadvantage. Okay, so why variation very important? Because variation allowed the population to overcome the problem of the unstable environmental condition. I always say the environmental factor always change. Okay, so today it can be brown color. I mean, after few years it may become white color. So if there is no variations, a population without variations can be eliminated or disappear as a result of drastic change in the environmental conditions. Okay, so a uniform populations can survive very successfully in the optimum stable environment, but they have a low survival value in unstable environment. So uniform basically means that is the populations with no variation. Let's say, for example, only brown rabbit. If the environmental factor continue, there is no change in the environment. For example, it's still in the jungle. It doesn't matter. They can live very, very good. But if there is a change in the environment factor, change the ice age, snow, okay, cover the background white color, then they have a low survival rate now. Okay, so without variation, a population will not produce recombinant individual with new genotypes for survival in the new environments. Okay. So if through the sexual reproduction and inheritance is very important, we're crossing over, okay, and also the independent assortment. So we have a different variations. Okay, that's very, very important. So in natural selections, favorable allele means advantageous allele are selected and unfavorable or disadvantaged allele will be eliminated from the population. So natural selection favor the organism that are most adaptable in the existing environment. So those organisms will have the most number of offspring, contribute to the most of the gene pool. That's very, very important. Always remember, just now we say that a agouti rabbit, when the number is high, so means that they have the chance to reproduce and pass on the allele. So means that allele frequency for the agouti will be high, but small allele, they won't be able to pass on the allele to the next generation. Okay, therefore probability for the small a allele will drop. So means that big A allele will contribute to the most of the gene pool. So what's the gene pool? We're going to learn it in the next two subtopics. Okay, so we have three forms of the selections. We have these stabilizing selections, directional selections, and disruptive selections with some of the example. When we talk about stabilizing selections, we're against, okay, two extreme end we against. Too good, don't want. Too bad, don't want. We are on the intermediate one. That is called stabilizing selection. Okay, for example, okay, those got PhD. Okay, those students got a PhD. Those students that didn't got into uni, for example, they stopped at Form 4, Form 5, for example. So what happened to these two groups? If the company is a not so well-established company, they only hire, they don't have the higher budget. They say that, oh, my higher budget only 2,000 or 3,000. So PhD candidates say that, oh, 2,000 or 3,000 not enough for me. So they lose the job, they don't have the job. Okay, and at the same time, those students that didn't go into uni, they don't have the skill. The company says, oh, you don't have the skill. So they against what? Against two extreme ends. When against two extreme ends, so means that only the intermediates will be selected. So means that those with a uni, okay, getting the degree or master, yeah, they may be able to find the job. So this is what we call stabilizing selection against two extreme ends. How about directional selection? Directional selections will against one extreme end only. For example, okay, in this case, we can against, for example, the company say that, oh, sorry, we need to have a skillful one. So those with the uni qualification, you can actually apply. So those without the uni qualifications, as if up to A level only or up to diploma only, oh, sorry, they can't apply. Why? Because in this case, against them. They're the policy, the company policy against them. For one extreme end. So you get PhD doesn't matter, you get the degree doesn't matter, master doesn't matter. We push for the ends, you can apply. How about disruptive selection? Disruptive selection basically against intermediate. Okay, against intermediates. Are you clear? So it means that two goods, okay, two bads, okay. So for example, the company may have a different position. Okay, we need to have very skillful person, so get a PhD candidate. Okay, and at the same time, the company may have the positions, let's say for example, for clerk, which do not need to have the very skillful in terms of the products, for example. So they have the chance to apply. But those with the degree, okay, because of the salary, okay, want to apply for the clerk, salary too low. If you apply for the skillful job, cannot because they don't have the skill. So those are the ones will be against in the intermediate. So no matter which kind of the selections, no matter which kind of selections, basically they have to depend on the conditions or the environmental conditions. So we're going to start it with the stabilizing selections. I say that stabilizing selections eliminates two extreme groups. You can see that against at the left hand and the right hand, and the intermediates will be the one that have the selective advantage. Okay, so what is the example? For example, plant height. The height of the plant might be acted on the stabilizing selections. Why? Because in the jungle or in the forest, those plants are too tall, they were susceptible for the wind damage. Wind may flow and then destroy the leaf. Okay, those are too short. They may not be able to survive. Why? Because less of sunlight, no sunlight for them to carry out photosynthesis. So those in the intermediate, can you see that? They won't, they won't get the wind damage. At the same time, they also get sufficient light intensity. So in this kind, they will continue to grow. So in the jungle, you can see that very tall plants, not many. Very short plants, not many, but many of them will be the intermediate one. Are you clear? Okay, so this is one example for the plant. The plant heights act by the stabilizing selections. Why? Because the selections now against who? Against the two extreme. Too tall, one extreme, too short, another extreme. So these two groups will be removed. Can you see that? So the plants with the genotypes or the allele code for the very tall, then they won't be able to survive. They won't be able to pass on the allele to the next generation. Okay, so that's why allele frequency for the intermediates will continue to increase. Another example is the malaria and also sickle cell anemia. This is a very famous example when we talk about stabilizing selection. Okay, so if you look at the Africa, the frequency of the sickle cell allele is very high compared to the whole world. Are you clear? To the whole world, the frequency of sickle cell allele is very high. And when you study the what we call this the map, you realize that the part with the sickle cell match with the part of the regions. Can you see that the regions with the high sickle cell anemia cases match with the regions the regions with the malaria? Can you see that? Okay, so what is the correlations? We use the word correlation, basically means that what is their relation? Why sickle cell anemia cases is high and then malaria cases also high? So it means that is there any factor or not? So okay, so in the study actually show what? We have this, okay, the person with HbA, they are normal. They don't have sickle cell anemia. A person with HbA, sorry, HbS, they have sickle cell anemia. So it means that these two extreme groups, intermediates will be HbA, HbS, where they are carrier. Intermediate. So what will happen here is the first extreme, normal, they are susceptible for the malaria. Malaria will kill them. Are you clear? Sickle cell anemia, in this case, they were killed by sickle cell anemia. Anemic, not enough blood. So they are anemic. So it means these two groups will be killed. Okay, two different environmental factors. So those that remaining one will be the intermediate, which are carrier. So first, because half of the hemoglobin will be defective, but another half will be normal. So it means that they don't have sickle cell anemia. And because of this sickle cell, malaria have less chance to infect this kind of patients. So make them continue to survive and pass on the allele to the next generation. So it means that a lot of time you can see that it will be the heterozygous crossed with heterozygous. So it means that you can get HbA, 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 HbS, and HbS, HbS. So at the end of this, you can see that what will happen. This one killed by malaria, this one killed by the sickle cell anemia, this group continue to survive. So therefore, because they continue to survive, HbS a lot, right? So HbS also will pass on to the next generation. So therefore, you can see that sickle cell allele is very high in the region with the malaria. Why? Because in this case, malaria acts as the selective pressure. So there are two forms of selective pressure here. We have the anemia and also malaria. So at two different ends there. Can you see that? Okay. So in this study, it's found that the people with heterozygous for sickle cell anemia, sickle cell allele, are much less likely to suffer from serious active malaria compared to homozygous. Okay, so they can continue. So HbA, HbS now they have the selective advantage. So both allele remain in population where the malaria is an important environmental factor. So if you compare to the world where there is no malaria, HbS allele has almost completely been removed from the populations. Okay. So this is the first part. Again, just a summary here. So stabilizing selection, again, who? Again, two extreme groups. Against two extreme groups. So it means that the intermediate group will be the ones that continue to survive and pass on the allele to the next generation. So that is the idea of the stabilizing selections. Okay. So now we continue with these directional selections. Directional selection means again one extreme group only. Favor one extreme against another extreme. Okay, so it will make the curve actually shifted. Can I see that? Okay, it will make the curve shifted. So one other example here we're going to learn is the industrial melanism. So what's mean industrial melanism? So the animals, okay, or the insect we're going to study here is called peppered moth. Okay, peppered moth. So well, who are they? They are night flying moth. In the mornings or daytimes, what they do, they rest underneath or the branches of the tree. So can you see that the tree? Okay, they rest. So this is the moth. So what happened here is they are very, very good to camouflage themselves. So it means that stop them or protect them from the insect eating birds. So it means that the birds won't be able to eat them. Okay. So what will happen here is until 1849, all specimens of this moth collected had pale wing. So this kind of the structure, this kind of color, we call them as a speckled form. Okay, speckled form. Okay, but after 1849, speckled form actually reduced in number. Speckled form reduced in number, but melanic form continued to increase, particularly in the industrial area. So there is a selection already. Now look at this. What will happen here is we have two areas. One area is an unpolluted area. Another area is a polluted. Okay, this is in 1849. But before 1849, what we can see that all of them, they are speckled form. White speckled form. Are you clear? All the moth. But in 1849, we can see that there were differences. Means that in the unpopulated area, speckled form high. But in the polluted area, melanic form is high. Can you see that? So if they were a particular, variations now, right? So if I plot the graph, you can see that now. Speckled and melanic. So speckled is very high, melanics will be very, very low, almost no. But in the polluted area, you can see that speckled form now decrease and melanic form increase. So it favor a particular extreme compared to another variations. And unpolluted area, speckled form. Polluted area, melanic form. So what is the main reason? So look at this tree. This tree, you can see a bit of greenish color and gray color, right? You can see the greenish and gray color. So what happened here is these are covered by the organism called lichen. Okay, called by lichen. So this lichen, actually, they are sensitive to pollution. So it means that pollution will kill them. So if you look at this now, these two diagrams. So this tree actually covered by what? This tree actually covered by the lichen. So this is the where unpolluted area. So the tree still continue to cover by the lichens. So what happened here is, do you realize that in this diagram, you have the melanic form, very obvious melanic form. Where is the speckled form? Do you realize that this is a speckled form? So speckled form actually is a melanic form. Speckled form will be better camouflage. Okay, speckled form. Can you see that in the unpolluted area with the lichen? So means that they are better camouflage, they survive better, they can pass on the speckled form allele to the next generation. But melanic form will be killed. Can you see that? Are you clear? But when we know that lichens, they are very sensitive to the pollutants such as sulfur dioxide, so means that lichen will be killed. So you can see that this is no lichen. When no lichens, what will happen here is, so speckled form now become very, very obvious. A speckled form become very, very obvious. So means that they will be one to be killed. But melanic form, can I see that? The melanic form. So melanic form continue to survive and then pass on this allele, melanic allele, to the next generation. Can I see that? So the change in the environment factor here favor a particular extreme end. So in the unpolluted area, favor the speckled form. But in the polluted area, now is a change. They favor the melanic form. So it favor one extreme end. So this is an example of the directional. Right? It's an example of the directional selection. It changed the direction now. Can I see that? Initially speckled form, but now melanic form in the polluted area. So always remember, guys, changes in the environmental factor only affect the livelihood of allele surviving in the population, but they do not affect the livelihood of such allele arising by mutation. Whether mutation take place or not is nothing to do with the change of environmental factor, but the environmental factor will basically affect the livelihood. Who can survive, who can't survive. Those that can survive will pass on the allele to the next generations, then change the allele frequency or increase the allele frequency in the gene pool or in the particular gene pool. Okay. So directional selection play a very important role in the evolutionary process. This is very important, guys. Okay, if we compare, evolution can take place when we have the directional selection. So it means that the selection pressure will increase the frequency of advantageous allele in the population. So the changes in the allele frequency in this case is the basis of evolution. So making the organism better adapt. So one example of evolutions here is antibiotic resistant. You have to understand here is bacteria. Okay, we always use the antibiotics. When you use the antibiotics, actually antibiotic acts as a selection pressure. So look at this diagram. Okay, so we have non-resistant bacteria, and due to the mutation now they generate, a particular protein. So turn them into the antibiotic resistant strains. So means that now initially they do not have, okay, you try to imagine initially, if without the random mutation take place, if they do not generate or develop the antibiotic resistant protein or enzyme, what will happen? They don't have the selective advantage. But now with the mutation take place, a random mutation allowed them to form these antibiotic resistant proteins. Therefore, they have the selective advantage. They continue to grow. Okay, because antibiotic cannot kill them. So if you look at this in the detail, first, if you look at the bacteria, okay, resistant, without resistant. Can I see that? So resistant will continue to grow, without resistant will be killed. So when continue to grow, then they can pass on this antibiotic resistant allele to the next generations, to the offspring. Okay, so therefore increase the probability or the, okay, increase this probability of the resistant allele. Okay, so again, you can try the questions here. Antibiotic resistant, you guys have learned in the antibiotics, in the chapter 11, chapter 10, infectious diseases. Okay, so you can go back to read it. Okay, so this is a form of evolution. Now, why I say evolution? Because initially they cannot adapt, right? Bacteria cannot adapt to the environment with the antibiotics, but now with the antibiotics they can. Because why? They have the antibiotic resistant allele. Okay. So we will say that the misuse, okay, the misuse of the antibiotic exert the selection pressure on the bacteria. So the greater the misuse, the greater the selection pressure. Therefore, bacteria tends to evolve resistant to the antibiotics. So always remember, okay, life always find the way. I always say that life always find the way. Okay, so when you give antibiotic, bacteria can't survive. If bacteria want to survive, they have to find a way. So what is the way? Antibiotic resistance. So once they survive, okay, then they will continue to pass on this allele to the next generations. So this is something that calls survival skill. If in one population, I always say that, okay, life is tough. Okay, for example, we do not know how to plant the crop plants, for example, initially. So we have to go into the jungle. We have to go to the jungle to find the fruits. Sometimes we do not know, or some fruit may be poisoned, right? So it will kill the population. But if someone manage to find out, oh yeah, we can grow the wheat, we can grow the rice. So when they know, they teach the next generation how to grow. So those who know how to grow the rice continue to survive, pass on the skill to the next generation. So same goes to this bacteria. When they develop the antibiotic resistant allele, they will continue to pass on this allele to the next generations because they survive better. Those, I mean, in the populations, they survive better with the skill that they can plants, okay, or grow the crop plants, will continue to survive. Okay, so this is directional selection. Favor who? Favor those who can adapt against those who can't adapt. Okay, so therefore, this is what we call as a directional selection. Favor a particular extreme end against another opposite end. Okay, extreme end. So this is the example, two examples of the directional selections. Okay, so we continue now with the last type of selections called disruptive selection. So disruptive selection actually against, okay, against the intermediate. When against the intermediate, so means that these two ends will increase in terms of the number. Okay. So the continuity of the normal distributions of a wider range of the measurement is disrupt. So it forms two smaller groups here. Can you see that? It forms two smaller groups. So it breaks the continuity. Okay, so disruptive selection occur in the Galapagos finches. Okay, Charles Darwin was the one that actually go to these islands and study of this. So in the Galapagos islands, there are plants with the produce a big hard seed. Okay, they also plant produce fine and soft seed. And then he go and observe the finches and the beats of the finches. So you can see that some with the large beat, some with the small beat. Can I see that? Okay, so there are fewer or none. Okay, so either big or small, but very small with moderate beats. Okay, those with a moderate beat, for example, in this case, moderate. Okay, so low number. This one high number, high number. So intermediate, can you see that? Can you see that? Okay, intermediate. So he studied why. Okay, realize that those with the big beats, they can take the beat and hard seed, because why? They can break the seed. Those with small one, they can actually take the fine and soft seed. So both of them have no issues to get sufficient nutrients and grow and pass on the allele to the next generation. How about moderate? Moderate one, want to take hard seed, cannot big, not want to take soft one, it cannot compete with the smaller one, because smaller ones, okay, small birds, small beats, then they do not eat a lot, they can get sufficient nutrient. But intermediate one, they won't be able to compete with those with the small bits. So as a result, we have two extreme group are selected for the survival and reproductions. Intermediate group decrease from generation to generation. So if you plot the graph, you will see that large, small, okay, so you see that two peaks. Okay. Another example is the hippocampus. A hippocampus is a seahorse. Seahorses is another example of disruptive. Okay, very unusual because male rather than female become pregnant, male. And the male have this brood pouch. Now, they have the pouch at their body there. So the larger the male, the larger the pouch. Okay, and female transfer the unfertilized egg into the pouch. So larger female actually produce more eggs. So it means that they prefer to have the large pouch. So it means that large one will deposit the egg to the large. Okay, large female always deposit to the large. Small one will always deposit to the small. So this is something like the selection. Large one always will large one, small one always will small one. Intermediate one, how? Intermediate one want to find the intermediate ones can, but the problem is when it comes to the predations. When it comes to predations, large ones can escape from the predator. Okay, can run away. Small one, they can hide. Intermediate one, they want to hide, no space for them to hide. If you want to escape, they may not be strong enough to escape from the predator. So therefore, you can see that large one can continue to grow, small one continue to grow, and intermediate one will be low. Can I see that? So it's a form of disruptive selections. Okay, so what will happen here is among three types of natural selection, disruptive selection is the least common, but they play a very important role in the evolution and even formations of the new species. So this one we're going to learn in the final part of our topic, which known as speciations. Okay, so this is what we have to learn for today. Okay, so what's mean disruptive? Disruptive basically means that we disrupt the continuity. So we're going against the intermediates, leaving two extreme ends to continue to survive. And you look at this, large one continue with large one, small one continue with small one, until one moment large one and small one, they cannot recognize each other as the same species. Then we see that that is a development of the new species. Okay, so with this, I have done for today class. Let me stop the recording.